But there's many reasons for which I do like MarineLorD's chances here, and we'll go into them right after this. Spawning in the top left-hand side of the map for Team Coquette Authentique Pepite. I'm so bad at that name. It's MarineLorD. Coca Authentique Pepite.
Yeah, I'm not even going to try to take a stab at that. In the bottom right, we have the red Protoss player. He is ShoWTimE.
I'll put my theory forward here, Nate, and you tell me what you think, okay? But
Hit me.
For me, what's been happening, right? Like, ShoWTimE comes from a 3-0 against Big Gabe. Even in the lobby, both players were kind of like just bantering a little bit. MarineLorD was saying, hey, no blink DTs, please. ShoWTimE said, sure. MarineLorD said,
don't cheese me,
like,
please.
Liar. Yeah, and then he said, you killed my dad 3-0, right? Kind of acknowledging that Big Gabe is perceptually, and I would say just straight up the better player between the two, between MarineLorD and Hero Marine, right? Like the two Marines. So why can ShoWTimE lose here if he 3-0'd the bigger guns, you would argue? I think that stylistically, the way that he matched up against Big Gabe in those games was perfect for ShoWTimE because he looked like the wall that he is, and come the late game, he just looked incredible. But in his interview, he even said practice hasn't been going that well. And he said he didn't want to go against MarineLorD out of MarineLorD Raynor in particular, because MarineLorD plays all the dirtiest types of styles of Terran that you could imagine, right? So clearly it's the early game, I think, that we're going to be looking at intently here for the most part. And that is one of the two areas, in my opinion, where MarineLorD really thrives, right? Like it's that early game. And if you survive that weird, wonky early game, come the late game, he will look to stabilize and use those late game compositions and have them very well thought out. So yeah, I think MarineLorD is looking very strong, but I mean, ShoWTimE is too, so this could go either way still. I think slight advantage for me goes to the French.
I think that's a pretty reasonable way to put it. And I do agree with you that one of the things that makes MarineLorD dangerous, and you know, when we talk about what makes Terrans good or bad strategically, most of the time, everybody just does the same thing. And people are very, very, very opposed to trying new stuff outside of like, oh, which order will I get my gases in before I do a Hellion or a mine drop? But what makes MarineLorD dangerous is that all the things that people love to just, you know, crap on, for lack of a better way to say it, when it comes to strategies or builds or units, he doesn't care about that. And even though MarineLorD is one of those people that you'll see out there, you know, being memey and saying like, oh, this is OP or that's OP, like you can pretty much do anything as long as you execute it well enough. You know, everything is on the table in StarCraft. That's what makes it a good balanced game. And I don't think that he says those things completely willy-nilly, but it gives off this air of like you have a hard time taking him seriously. And even if you're not consciously doing it, you might be in the back of your mind kind of underestimating him, because you're like, oh, well, he's one of those people that just like whines or says balance, whatever. But it's not like he isn't putting in the time, and it's not like he's not thinking about the builds that he's doing. And especially off those TVZs, his macro is clearly there. He's put out some huge armies. His control's been good. He's been playing ball like we've honestly never seen him play before. And that's what makes him such a dangerous player, because you can go into a series against Clem and know that he should play up to a certain level, but you also know he's not going to do a whole lot of weird stuff. And if for MarineLorD, it's complete opposite. He's going to play well, and he's going to throw builds at you that you've never seen before.
Yes, indeed. This time around with a little bit more standard of an opening, of course, with the Widow Mines, but not. It's not unprecedented, but it's also not the most common. It is a dirty type opener. It is the opening that the type of opener that will allow you to get super far ahead. But ShoWTimE, very good job of accounting for it for the time being. Already an observer in case there was even cloak for those Widow Mines. And yeah, MarineLorD is just gonna go for looking like a Raven tank, Marine bio tank timing, right? So it looks already kind of scary. So starts with the annoying Widow Mines into not the third CC, into not the greed after potentially doing some economic damage, but rather just pushing on the gas pedal on the aggression.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. Is ShoWTimE in this game has already had units go around. And wow, this Stalker just straight up gets murdered in front of the base. That's a pretty big loss early on. Stalkers are not cheap. But I was going to say he's already scouted around all of his bases. We saw that earlier. He was checking in the bottom left. Like he really does not want to get caught by something. That's part of the strength of MarineLorD, is that when you do stuff like this, people start to be a little bit more cautious, and then you just play a normal game and you're like, okay, well, now I'm going to out macro you and just try to do a normal build, and maybe the Protoss has cut a corner or two to get that scouting. But I love that ShoWTimE's getting 6 extra gateways, Cats, because he knows he's going to need a lot to stop a big push from this Terran.
Yeah, even stalling worker production there for a second, as now he goes back to resume it, just to make sure that he is situated with those gateways in order to try and stop the eventual push of MarineLorD. I feel like this is going to be inevitable from his side of things, Nate. You can't just play without a third CC, make this much army, and not really look to do anything with it. So do you feel like he maybe has some room to pull the boys or do something of the sorts, or is this just going to be a normal or a more normal, I guess, 2-base tank push?
Usually with a push like this, when you have the Raven, I don't think that going all in here is going to be a very successful, mostly because we already have the Templar out. And Psystorm is one thing, which is going to be done in about 10-15 seconds. But another really critical part of these types of move outs for Terran versus Protoss especially is the Raven. And you're going to be saying, okay, well, interference matrix on a power unit, maybe a Dorito cannon onto a bunch of zealots. However, assuming that one of those High Templar just kind of walks forward, he can feedback it, but tries to get a mine drop at the same time.
Very nice.
And we'll get just a couple of probes.
Oh, careful with the Raven. Yeah, and that's just the thing, right? There are no Colossus, no Disruptors. So this Raven, not as good as it normally would be, still has some potential here with the Dorito cannon, as you like to call it, as well as the auto turrets. He's actually gonna get the same ult of the Warp Prism before it drops the High Templars, and this is gonna go time for MarineLorD, who is gonna try to capitalize on this opportunity. The shield battery overcharge is forced to be spent from ShoWTimE, so he will slow this down for a second while MarineLorD decides to take his third on location. So maybe thinking that was enough, or that at least ShoWTimE is ready enough with the High Templars now being free to storm.
I was going to say, I did not think that there was any chance he was going to get real damage done with this push. And then for a brief moment, the interference matrix on the prism. And normally we see Protoss keep units inside that prism so that, you know, they're safe against EMPs or being target fired or whatever, but there's no ghosts. So putting the Templar in the prism is more of like a finesse move. But if he had been able to get on that prism and shut that down, like if he locks it and then kills it and there's no storm, suddenly the question of whether or not he can get work done, he might have just won the game there if he'd been able to do it. I don't know that he's going to get that chance again, but we'll just have to wait and see as the Immortal's going to come up with some of these zealots. So the interference matrix is used on the Immortal, but there's Psystorm doing its job, forcing that Terran bio army away. There's still a lot of units here for MarineLorD, and he's actually done a really good job of not overextending. There's plenty of energy on the medevacs. He can keep healing up, and he hasn't overstemmed. I like what I've seen so far. He's not going to bash his head into a wall just because he thinks that he should be able to attack the Protoss player.
Yeah, beautiful moves on both fronts there. MarineLorD even looking to bait some storms that ShoWTimE doesn't really take the bait there. Now ShoWTimE with a massive army, and I really love everything decision-making wise. Compositionally, he has been ready for every step of MarineLorD so far. MarineLorD now burning the mines a little bit late, so ShoWTimE is going to try to capitalize. The Widow mines are going to connect onto a lot of those zealots, luckily for MarineLorD. But still, he is going to be forced to run through this choke. He knows this choke is dangerous, and so he will run without even stutter stepping. Don't want to allow those Templars in the War Prism to catch up to the army and get juicy storms off. Now the Ghost Academy is dropped for MarineLorD, but he might be on the defensive here, Nate, before he has any opportunity to get those ghosts out. So Storm with your backup against the wall, this could be really good for the German.
Yes, it's a very hard spot to be in for MarineLorD, largely, as you were saying, because the Ghost Academy isn't ready yet. There are some mines, they have the invisibility, but what's going to deal with the big damage dealers of this army? And the answer is not a whole lot. Storms on the bio, pushing it back. The Immortals can get up front, target down the Marauders, and SCVs are going to get pulled into Archons, which, as we all know, Cats, that's, yeah, they're jumping into the blender, hoping to, I guess, overwhelm the motor and cause it to burn out. But unfortunately, Archons, they don't really run out of those lightning shots from their hands. And while this attack might eventually get pushed back, the cost of 28 SCVs may be a little bit too much for the Treasury to bear.
It is a pretty steep cost. However, this also means, given that both supplies are more or less even, that the army of MarineLorD for a little bit longer is going to be significantly larger than ShoWTimE's. So I am actually a little bit surprised that MarineLorD doesn't seem to think that he has an opportunity to cross the map. So maybe looking to restabilize much later in the game. But if he kind of forgoes this timing, which looks to be the case, it's going to be a while until we see MarineLorD really be able to contest for this game. He has to hold like crazy for a little bit, and ShoWTimE already with the Colossus transition, which I'm not too huge of a fan of. Of course, he anticipates that the Ghosts are going to be there for the Templars. So it's not like you have too many more options aside from perhaps the Disruptor. But MarineLorD is already very, very Marauder heavy. So this Colossus, if they're not perfectly microed, could be in a little bit of trouble still.
Yeah, I love that he's able to build 2 at a time. Getting the second Robo at the time that he did was really smart. And I don't hate it, mostly because he killed so many SCVs that the problem is you can just warp in the High Templar at any time, right?
Yeah.
There's not a huge amount of time needed to get it out there. And once it's there, it starts to build the energy. So you have a very small window to hit before there's at least one storm. All I'm really getting to with this is you kind of need to have ghosts, right? That's the standard progression. You want ghosts versus High Templar, but he just lost 28 SCVs. So can you build ghosts and Vikings and bio and get upgrades? The answer is no. So we see just 3 Vikings and just like 1 or 2 ghosts against 3 Colossi and multiple High Templar. And I'm sure we'll have that Prism back out for micro and control on it. That is being built now. It's not quite done yet, but this is going to still be a very difficult army to engage head to head. So MarineLorD tries to go towards that third base, but there is a Templar kind of ready for him. That first Viking up front, we see how fast that gets popped in the Colossi. There's just nothing really to get in their way. There's so many Zealots, he can't target fire down. And yeah, ShoWTimE is going to happily collect a game 1 victory in this series. Cats, that was actually just really, really good, really crisp, really clean out of ShoWTimE. I was definitely worried about him when the Prism with the High Templar inside got interference matrix. If that gets killed and he doesn't have any storms, that tank push could end the game. I'm not going to say it would, but if he kills the third base, good luck trying to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what a beautiful game conceptually from ShoWTimE. I think that he was on top of everything, right? Like that's the perfect, I think, answer. He scouts very timely with his first observer, knows that MarineLorD is going for a 2-base push. And not just that, but knows exactly the contents of that 2-base push. If he wasn't already planning for the Raven, right, he goes for those Templars. Then the Raven has much less to do because interference matrix on a Colossus when it's your your single anchor on defense, that's, I mean, game changing, obviously. Or on a Disruptor that just fired and is about to perhaps collect on a bunch of clumped up bio units, right? But on Templar, it's the opposite, where the Templar is a much cheaper unit and a unit that actually can just feedback you, and then you don't have the advantage of kind of choosing your fight or choosing when you want to charge on forward or even disabling potentially any units. So I love that MarineLorD found an opportunity in spite of that to disable the Warp Prism because compositionally and theoretically, I think that ShoWTimE was ahead in every step of the way during that game. Yeah, very cool from him. MarineLorD's going to have to step it up.
Yes, he is. Might need to throw something a little more out of left field. Just another thing, I guess, worth touching on with how that game played out. It's not super common to see Protoss players go straight into Storm like that. It used to be a little bit more of a thing back in the day with some of these pushes because you'd want to get charge lots early on. But it's just, yeah, it's a nice way to kind of switch it up because the tanks already somewhat deal with Colossi. So if you go for Colossus first, or if you just go for Blink Stalkers, which a lot of Protoss will do until they get that 3-base already situated, then the siege tanks become really good. But he kind of built his build around not really caring about the tanks, and we saw how well he was able to handle it as a result. So let's see what kind of shenanigans we get into on Blackburn, as we have in the bottom left our blue Terran player trailing 0-1. He is MarineLorD.
And with a great display of both mechanical skill as well as just theory in the previous game, it is the German man for big ShoWTimE.
ShoWTimE. You almost got my brain to melt there. You said German, then you said big, and I'm like, your Marine's not in this game, silly. You silly goose cats.
Yeah.
What are you up to, little probe? What are you dreaming about? You're dreaming about catching the proxy? He's like, MarineLorD's gonna cheese me. MarineLorD's gonna cheat. Nope. Okay. Where's the proxy? Where is it?
He checked my
Where is he
favorite
hiding?
spot. You know, I'm still surprised that Terrans don't use that proxy spot, but I'd wager that MarineLorD has used it, and that's why ShoWTimE checks for it. But that's my favorite proxy barracks location for the Reapers on this map. And again, I haven't seen it used yet, but even if it gets scouted, more than half of the time, the SCV is unreachable in that location while building a barracks. So I think it's pretty nifty.
Yeah. It's the MarineLorD factor. It's because he will cheese, and you ask yourself, you're like, well, why don't Protoss do this? It's against everybody. Why don't you always see this probe scout in this manner? And it's because not everybody cheeses like this.
Yeah.
You know, we don't expect Hero Marine to throw down a barracks in that slow zone and try to lift it up or build Reapers out of it. That's just not what he does. But that is what MarineLorD does. And if you don't respect that, then anytime he does it, just a free win for him. So ShoWTimE he's an intelligent guy. You know, he's got more than just good looks, cats. He's got quite a brain up there too.
Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And MarineLorD is gonna be going for a Marine first opening into a reactor rather quickly here for the barracks. The factory is just situated a little bit far away in case there is another poke up that ramp to spot what he might be up to, I suppose. But it also hints at that maybe he's not too much in a rush to make Hellion. So I anticipate that we're gonna see maybe 8 Marines or something to load into a medevac from the side of MarineLorD here.
I would not mind that at all. Direct path. This map generally seen as pretty good for Terran. You've got a lot of drop space to use, a lot of tight choke points, and a good amount of air positions that you can kind of fly around with either a medevac or a liberator and do a lot of harassment on the mineral lines. So third command center though, from MarineLorD, very early. He wants to play the greedy game. And since it's a Stargate opening from ShoWTimE, I don't think he'll have a whole lot of opportunity to punish that, cats.
Yeah, and this is the beauty of MarineLorD. A player like MarineLorD, he doesn't care to be the most complete player. He loves min-maxing, right? So in the previous game, we saw him essentially go all in off of 2 base. In this game, we're seeing him be extremely greedy while still applying a minimum amount of pressure potentially with this Marine Force, or at least having the minimal viable product in terms of defense. I'm actually surprised that there is a Cyclone and not a tank, but that gives him a little more aggressive potential in this early game. So we'll see how that works out. It's also going to be fantastic against what ShoWTimE is actually doing this game, which is going for a very fast Oracle.
And that's exactly it. Is when you go for an opener like this, you're always going to have a couple of Marines, right? But you're also going to have the Cyclone. If the Protoss player on a different map is going for Blink Stalkers and you go 3 CC, you're usually very delayed on things like Stim and Marauders, so you can get bullied pretty badly. But against the Stargate opener, MarineLorD, he's super comfy. The Marines, they'll handle the natural. He almost caught the Oracle there with just the Cyclone itself, but that's kind of why I was saying this is actually a really good build order matchup specifically for MarineLorD, because he doesn't have to worry about being punished for his greed. As long as he doesn't leave both of his mineral lines exposed while he moves out on a push early on, he's fine. And he doesn't need to move out with an early push because he's already got a third command center. So he can maybe take his third and try to just build up for an attack maybe from ShoWTimE, or we'll just see him slap down a couple of extra barracks and cruise into the mid game with a nice economic lead, because you don't typically get to have 3 mules and triple SCV production ahead of the Protoss having their own third.
While defending perfectly, right? So he really does min-max here on defense and finds the perfect opening. We were talking about how that was the case for ShoWTimE in the last game. This time around, ShoWTimE is going to have to overcome a very good early game from MarineLorD, because MarineLorD's kind of getting away with murder here, Nate.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing that you can only do when somebody is really unsure of how you're going to play, because again, that's just the strength of being a wild card type player. And I think one of the things that gives MarineLorD such an edge in this tournament and how it's been getting better is just comes down to, like we were saying earlier, most Terran players, not very interesting when it comes to strategy and style. They all kind of do the same thing, and they're like, well, you know, the internet told me that if I hit 300 APM and don't drop below that, I'm going to win. So, but MarineLorD mixing it up, he really does just force his opponents into sometimes just making bad build decisions because they have no idea what they're going to go up against on any random game.
Yeah, one of the concepts that grinds my gears, Nate, is whenever I find someone on the internet saying stuff like, that's not a build, right? And I assure you, MarineLorD will have heard this a million times, but what people don't understand is that there's someone out there making builds, and one of those people is certainly MarineLorD. sensible builds, right? It's not just the element of surprise, it's that it makes logical sense. Like the steps that he takes make sense. And so with that type of approach, he is able to play at a comparable level to some of the best Terrans in the world in terms of mechanical prowess, which is so rare to see for innovators to be able to live up to that standard. And MarineLorD, with his vast experience as a professional gamer in this game, and even a high-level caliber player in other games like Age of Empires, like MarineLorD's really an excellent figure in terms of just strategy and planning and build orders. He is just one of my favorite Terrans to watch, perhaps ever.
Yeah, but ShoWTimE is currently winning this match so far because when it comes down to his fundamentals and his basics, he's got it on lock.
Oh yeah.
He has not really made that overextension. You could argue, okay, well, having the oracles against the 3cc opener, maybe he doesn't get to punish it, but he does get to scout. He has tabs on that base. He's
Yeah. Alrighty, so it looks like we've lost Nate for a second there. He was making some very interesting points that I would love to share with the rest of you, but we'll have to wait until he is back. For the time being, I mean, this game continues to progress, and it's MarineLorD that has a hefty supply lead on the back of all the advantages that we have been talking about through that early phase of the game. And Nate was making a point about how ShoWTimE is essentially contrasting MarineLorD in style. He is the wall. He is the epitome of this is a build order. This is tried and tested, but I will execute it better than most, if not just better than anyone, at least in Europe. In terms of macro play, he is usually unmatched, and everything that he makes is a good decision in terms of like what the conglomerate of people have decided is a good decision. He will blink into this main here for the time being, does get a turret for his troubles, now forced to blink out, doesn't lose anything in the process, but those stalkers are not going to be here on defense. So with the tank being sieged and the rest of the bio pushing on forward, MarineLorD is looking very strong. Those zealots that do not have charge, the bluff is called from MarineLorD. He does not load back into those medivacs. He says those zealots are going to be further slowed by the concussive shells, and with that he's going to kite back to his tank. The Widow Mines are there, however, to get rid of a lot of those zealots. MarineLorD with excellent traits here to start, but ShoWTimE ultimately with a defense, in spite of that disengage and that re-engage there. I thought that was going to be a little bit more costly. I thought that ShoWTimE was trying to force the bio of MarineLorD back into the medevacs, then backs away, and that's usually free damage onto those zealots. But ShoWTimE does somehow, some way manage to stabilize with the next warp in of units, now with the Colossus being out as well. And I believe Nate is back.
Yeah, I don't know what just happened there. I think the Google Meets thing just derped for like 3 seconds, but I've actually been here the whole time, Cats. You're a great caster, and I love you. I didn't lag in the game, so I don't know what that was, but big fight in the northeast. Good spread on MarineLorD's part. That one Colossus in the center. Good force fields from ShoWTimE are going to buy him a little bit more space. It's an exposed area. If the Marauders are able to jump on top of the Colossus, then that's where things get terrifying, because the dual reinforcement ones are going to show up just in the nick of time, but there's no support to keep them standing strong.
Oh, damn, I wonder, I mean, that was such a difficult decision, such cool decision-making from both players. Those stalkers were acting as a wall for the wall that is ShoWTimE for those Colossus, right? Like, he actually just doesn't move them because he thinks if you're gonna go for my Colossus, the route is gonna be longer. So then MarineLorD makes the very difficult decisions to not ignore the stalkers, but rather take him down while he's getting shot at by 2 Colossus, and that buys just enough space for ShoWTimE to continue to hold. But both players making brilliant decisions there in that instance with the whatever few units they had to work with. Still a huge advantage in my book for MarineLorD. He is ahead in terms of economy, though he is lagging behind one worker. He has the mules. That's a huge pickoff, and this is a big opening for him, Nate.
Oh, this is absolutely gnarly. Just the way that MarineLorD has set himself up in this game is just so strong, because you typically don't get to see Terrans that are going to be willing to sit back, build up what they need, solidify the defense, and then move out. Most of the time, it kind of comes back to that bashing the head against the wall sort of setup. Everybody just wants to constantly be aggressive, leave their flanks open 100% of the time, never leave anything back to defend. But he's actually got a little bit of bio on the other side of his gold mineral line that he's just left there because he doesn't want something to go counterattack and murder him. And he can still continue to be aggressive. He can still put this pressure on, hitting up with these mine drops. And the most important thing is the base count, the income. even without the mules being in consideration, MarineLorD has an abnormally large economy for a Terran at 11 minutes into a game versus a Protoss. And that's because he's been willing to be patient. He hasn't tried to force too much with his fights. And he's also just kept really good map awareness, units spread out, not slamming that F2 key like we see many others.
Most definitely. There's disruptors now on the way. I love that from ShoWTimE. It's going to be one of those key units that allows for a potential comeback if he can just hit the army in the middle. But he is lagging a lot of supply behind. MarineLorD knows this and will actually push on forward with a lot of those Marauders to take down one of the Colossus. Not the entire army here of MarineLorD, be not deceived. But things continue to look very good for the Frenchman. And I'm curious as to why not the entire army is there in the first place, Nate. Like, look at that. I guess expecting sellout run base.
Well, I just think about it this way. One of the biggest things that costs Terrans games when they make these big move outs and they just don't really check to make sure that they're not going to get hit with something while they do it. You know, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's able to beat someone like Raynor, not giving up as much to those run bys, to the counterattacks, to the backstabs, and just playing with a big brawling army that has a huge amount of economy behind it, but still keeping a lot of SCVs because he wants to be able to replenish and just keep the war machine going rather than committing to one all or nothing fight.
Yes, indeed. The ghosts are here now. The only problem for MarineLorD here are those disruptors. I mean, the Colossus are accounted for on multiple fronts. The Marauders are chunky, however, and they could very well get hit by those balls of doom. The rest of the army of MarineLorD is great, but there comes the first disruptor shot. It will get picked up before it can fire 3 at the same time. Is that enough? 1 will go up, but will that be enough? I mean, 4 for that much bio might just now be the timing for MarineLorD. The battery is at the front, unfortunately, for ShoWTimE, and that's not going to aid him too much. The Colossus have all fallen. Will the Viking land? It looks like MarineLorD doesn't deem it necessary for the time being. He has reset the army of ShoWTimE in terms of complexity, Nate. So even though there is a pushback from ShoWTimE, the next push from MarineLorD could still be very deadly.
Yeah, and here's the thing. He throws away a lot of the bio, right? But the medevacs, he does a good job of keeping them alive. He doesn't throw away his Vikings, and the ghosts are actually still there too. So incredibly confident Micro, stutter stepping forward into the disruptors and killing all of them. But meanwhile, he's got all this extra economy going back home. His most expensive units are the ones that are still alive. And he's got advanced ballistics +2. So those liberators are going to be coming out and they're going to be two-shotting those stalkers, which is a massive spike for TVP. That's going to give him a whole bunch of extra utility, zoning control, map control, because MarineLorD has not just tunnel visioned on trying to fight and kill. He hasn't presented himself with some impossible task of kill them before they get to late game. He's not putting these weird arbitrary things that are, you know, meta based around his decision making. He's just playing his game, making smooth progression from pace to pace, getting the upgrades, getting the army composition. I feel like we've hardly seen any TVPs reach a place where the Terran actually gets this full rounded out army where they have a medevacs and liberators and ghosts and all the upgrades. It's always a way more scrappy situation, and I think that's just, again, a testament to MarineLorD really checking off all of his boxes and just playing confidently, not stressing himself out over what he needs to do.
Yeah, such a beautiful, such a layered approach from MarineLorD, right? It just makes sense. It's like you're saying. I mean, the Liberators, they haven't engaged up until now. Now they're about to hit that +2 that I just learned from you is completely critical in this matchup. And with this number of Liberators, with the upgrade hitting, now is when MarineLorD kind of merges his army and goes for it. But ShoWTimE on a very solid flank will actually take advantage of positioning, amazing positioning from the German here to surround the entire army of MarineLorD. And there is zoning, but what does it matter if the Liberators are backstabbed, Nate? And with that
flank,
my God, I mean, ShoWTimE just positionally a step ahead of MarineLorD, and the nuke will not land by the looks of it on any probes. So mostly
it's a cannon and a pylon. Oh, he'll try to pick off some probes with that last ghost too, because he's going to run out of energy and will not be able to escape. I do like that ShoWTimE has DTs mixed into the army. The way that he's kind of focused on just having that has been really nice. They trimmed the fat heavily on the bio, but as you were saying before, what a gnarly self gank, I guess, onto the Liberators from behind. The biggest weakness, of course, they place the freedom zone, but that's it. There's no they don't really get to shoot anything else. So if it's all in front of them, getting behind is a great way to punish the the fact that they do need to stop and kind of plant themselves, even though they're air units. I don't really get it myself, but hey, that's science in the year 2400 or whenever the hell this takes place.
Most definitely. And I mean, look at this game. It's so positional, right? And MarineLorD says, if you want to come through here, you're going to have to go through liberation zones. Therefore, you have to kind of forgo this position. And ShoWTimE says, well, I guess I have to make something happen on the other side because there's no way I'm going through those liberation zones. But he isn't able to because those rocks are still up. And that will buy enough time for MarineLorD to get back with his entire army here. And it is looking like ShoWTimE might want to disengage, especially on this high ground that's still kind of wide open and kind of easy to surround.
Yeah, it's just turning into like this awkward dance. And I think the most important thing, at least for ShoWTimE, is trying to keep he's been trying to keep his army varied. And I think you were addressing this earlier, but the complexity of it with whether it's just the disruptors and the stalkers, because the more that this becomes stalker disruptor, as you can see, those liberators are absolutely devastating to fight against. Like if the stalkers try to blink into this and kill these libs, they're all gonna die, every last one of them. But what he's doing is buying some time for this. We're gonna see the DT try to snipe this base. The reaction time from MarineLorD is on point. You've got a full orbital right there, so if you need to scan, you can. And see you later, Gator.
That was incredible. I mean, he hates those. He talked about it, so he's going to be cognizant and aware of that. A lot of liberation zones is where ShoWTimE is choosing to take this fight. One disruptor ball will connect onto the bio dead center, so that is pretty nice for ShoWTimE. But here comes the rest of the army of MarineLorD, and he is gaining a flying advantage. And look at that, just in the perfect time. And victory, MarineLorD, to equalize things.
Y'all, I love you. I know you can hear me. Thank you for catching the explosion of that nuke at the very end.
That's
Base God, everybody in chat, respect for Nyal, Base God Nyal. Because I'm like, man, he got a nuke off during all of that while pulling the SCVs to defend his planetary fortress and getting the Liberators to set up that bottom left. And again, the way that you phrased it, Cats, it's a very layered approach. You know, he's not setting any sort of expectation on what has to happen in the game. Mm-hmm. He's playing it somewhat conservatively in the early game. But again, that only works because, you know, if we go into this next game, it's tied 1-1. It's just as likely that he does what he did last game as he does like a 2-Rex or some other form of really aggressive play. So for ShoWTimE, you're like, obviously you don't want to let the Terran go 3cc, right? Have their stim delayed and just macro up like crazy. You know, you'd be like, well, if I had gone Blink Stalkers, I could have just poked him to death, right? He would have hardly had anything, etc. And yeah, that's the tricky part about playing MarineLorD. You have absolutely no idea what he's going to do, and I couldn't tell you what's going to happen in game 3 myself.
Yeah, and of course him playing to the map as well, right? Like Blink Stalker is very difficult to make work, for example, on Blackburn. So he's surely saying, well, I don't have to account for that at all, right? So is this a build if you don't have to account for Blink Stalkers? Is a very difficult question, or a very separate, unlike question than can I just do this on any map at any point, right? Like, so MarineLorD really knowing the range of possibilities there for ShoWTimE, also knowing that ShoWTimE feels very confident in the Stargate opening in that particular map and with the double Oracle in that particular map, which is exactly what we saw from ShoWTimE against Big Gabe and something that he talked about in his interview. He's just confident with that opener against anything. So when you say that confidently, MarineLorD has the possibility to just adapt and make a build order catered to just completely shutting down the first 2 Oracles, not being aggressive at all, but rather just taking huge economic leads. And we've had kind of one game in favor of each player as far as build orders are concerned. This is already my favorite series of the day, I think, so far. And it promises more and more. Nate, who will get the edge this time around?
Yeah, that was a crazy way for that one to go. Next map is Oxide, another great Terran map. We'll have to see if MarineLorD is going to turn up the heat on this game. I think he will. This is a map that kind of calls for it. And if you're ShoWTimE, you might maybe see him try to bake in something a little more aggressive for his harass option. Maybe try to get a Prism out earlier or something like that, because you know, it's such a great time that we can look at a Terran who just says, I'm not afraid to play the late game against a Protoss, and I'm going to kick his ass if we go that far. And that's exactly what happened. So ShoWTimE, and he got the opportunity to do everything he wanted to as well. Let's not pretend like he didn't get his tech out. He was able to get the Disruptors. He was able to get the Colossi. He was able to get the Storm. But there needs to be a little bit of something else there if he wants to stretch MarineLorD thin enough to beat him.
Yeah, he definitely had some amazing moments in that last game. We are tied 1-1. And spawning in the bottom left-hand side for Berlin International Gaming, it is ShoWTimE.
And his opponent in the northeast position, spawning as the blue Terran player, the Frenchman. He is MarineLorD.
One of the more adaptive Terrans, a Terran that's actively looking to exploit weaknesses, a Terran that is looking to
Like, those fights could all play out very differently. Like, can I blame ShoWTimE for the fact that he had 4 disruptors fire into a bio army that dived him, and it just happened to kill 3 of the disruptors before they could shoot at the very last millisecond? No, I can't blame him for that. I feel like he did everything he could. It's just, you know, it's really hard. If the Terran's willing to commit and not double think or question themselves, then you can do some pretty amazing things.
Yeah, indeed. And MarineLorD is very decisive, and he just played such a good game. And again, I think he did have the lead in terms of just build orders overall in the previous match. Not sure that will be a recurring theme, but we've seen it in both games so far, right? And both players kind of capitalizing and seeing it through to the end. ShoWTimE even carving himself not to MarineLorD's discredit, because I mean, you expect the army to be at the front when you siege those liberators, but rather for ShoWTimE to be as quick to kind of anticipate the path of his opponent and just be on his tail to capitalize when the Liberator siege towards the end there, and giving himself shots at a game that you know, for most players I think would be impossible from a deficit. So ShoWTimE definitely playing a good series so far, as is MarineLorD. These two are tailor-made for each other, Nate.
It's a good matchup.
Yeah.
And I don't think we can say that should be surprising. We're in the upper bracket, right? These guys are playing for a spot at not just the top of course DreamHack Europe, but they're playing for a spot at the season finals now too. So you can really see both of them belong here. It's been a good back and forth. We had a really good, crisp, clean game 1 out of ShoWTimE. MarineLorD kind of dialed in the greed on game 2, was able to get it done. And I think that's also something worth keeping in mind. I mean, ShoWTimE historically, you know, he's got that nickname, D-Mauer, the wall. He's a hard guy to bring down, but sometimes you just got to do weird stuff to get it done. And look at this. We have so many Widow Mines being made. It is against the Stargate opener. However, as I know Rotterdam loves to talk about when it comes to the mine drops, there's not detection there. So the Phoenix do have to catch this, or they have to all be there in large enough numbers to lift the mines up. If a couple of them are able to burrow up, they can still blow up the mineral line in half a second. So
the Depth though. The Depth barely caught wind of this medevac, but it's still gonna slip on through. So the Phoenix is barely missing their own timing. One will reposition to spot this medevac a little bit later. Will it? Oh my god, that was actually so close. Did it see it? I don't think it saw it. This is the perfect gap for MarineLorD. I mean, that's just mostly luck, but it's gonna work out. I mean, he forged his own luck in a certain sense, and this Widow Mines somehow still ShoWTimE with the presence of mind to react to them. Incredible job from him, and with Adepts on the low ground. Wow.
Now, one of those mines will detonate onto a Phoenix, but solid hold. I mean, gets a medevac and 4 mines in exchange for 2 probes, pretty much, and a little bit of lost mining time. But I think you're more than happy to have that be the way that it goes down, rather than the other way, where you keep mining but lose half your workers.
Such great crisis management there for ShoWTimE, who was looking for the Widow Mines on entry, right? And that's the beautiful thing. Oh, now MarineLorD setting a bait. It will gain him 1 Phoenix, but now he'll have to evacuate right away, or this medevac as well as the mines will be in peril. Actually, the Phoenix doesn't take the second shot from the Widow Mine, so now pretending is MarineLorD just to bait another shot, but ShoWTimE knows which Phoenix to tank it with, and with that, this drop is gonna be in a lot of trouble and will go down.
Yeah, and those will be 2 Phoenix that'll be pretty easy to kill later on when that time comes. But for now, it's a really good play because, of course, until there's something that can shoot them, they're still going to be able to fly around, zone away. And like you said, ShoWTimE managing to deal with that without losing really anything other than a bit of the hit points on those Phoenix. So plus, Stim and Combat Shield are both going to boot up for MarineLorD. He starts his 4th and 5th barracks. But Cats, just like last game, it's not a 2-base push. It's straight to the 3 bases. So he wants to play that big eco game, and it feels weird to say this, but yeah, he's not afraid for this one to go long. I can't imagine that he is after how well that last one went. Oh, the stasis ward under the commands.
Wow, that is
Cats
obnoxious.
This is like I can't drive my tractor across the field because there's a twig on the ground. Like, no, we can't risk it. We can't risk it. It's gonna get chopped up. Some part of it's gonna fly up the muffler or something.
Look at that.
Transmission's just gonna melt. No.
Look at the expert angling from MarineLorD, though. I mean, you have to give him credit because he could have just ran the Marine straight in, and then he would have had to wait for the stasis trap to wear out. But he actually runs the Marine at an angle where it's not gonna interrupt the landing. Just expertly done.
Yeah, good grab. Gets a revelation. Picks up 2 SCVs. So ShoWTimE doing his best to keep that harass going and getting the Phoenix over here. This is what was missing last game. We did not get to have this level of harass. And part of that is because the air is a little bit more exposed to the rest of the field. There's not like Blackburn where, you know, your mineral line is at the edge of the map and there's nothing there. And the only other airspace is just further down to your next one. So since the bases aren't lined up, there's a little more room to maneuver around. And Oracle barely getting away.
Yeah, an extra scan spent for that as well. I like the approach of ShoWTimE, so he is also, you know, not pulling off anything crazy that we haven't seen before, but certainly playing to the map here. So the 3rd base of MarineLorD is fairly open grounds. He wants to potentially charge in with charge lots and Archons, excuse the redundancy, but MarineLorD is actually going to give him an opportunity to engage on his side of the map, and I think ShoWTimE's going to be rather happy with this. Nate, I don't see this quite working out well for MarineLorD, but maybe if he gets in position before ShoWTimE spots him, he can get a cancel at least. Nice.
Yeah, and he does. He immediately cancels it. ShoWTimE does not want to get into another little micro fight in the open field against MarineLorD. The stutter step was very good last time around, but I gotta be real with you. I do think he could just dive on this. That's a pretty ludicrous number of zealots.
Yeah,
I think of 27 charge lots.
Absolutely, and I mean, they won't scale well against Widow Mines as well as they continue to be added. Now 2 being added at a time on the side of MarineLorD, so I like what ShoWTimE's doing, but now MarineLorD recognizing that he has no business being out on the map, that it is ShoWTimE who needs to be on the aggressive. Now hugging this corner is going to be extremely important. A lot of units are going to get taxed just by turning the corner. ShoWTimE knows that, so he's going to go north first so that he can look to cross or go down this ramp at an angle where he's not getting shot at. And angles do quite matter in StarCraft. I would love to see ShoWTimE just take down the rocks on his side of, take out all the rocks really, but on his side of the map primarily, because he really wants surface area to work with this sort of army.
Yeah, I wonder if this is an adjustment from the amount of tanks that there were in the last game that he's kind of moved into having so many zealots early on. I don't know that he's going to stick with relying on them entirely because, I mean, the tank pushes are, you know, it's something that you expect to happen a bit earlier on this map. The longer the game goes, the more the map is going to open up. Cyclone finds the prism, but some charge lots will be dropped out. And again, there's a huge amount of airspace on Oxide, so Cyclone will not be able to give chase, but ShoWTimE's going to push it right outside the natural. I'm not sure about that. Yeah, he's going to step back. That's a very dangerous place to try to force a fight in a choke point like that.
Yeah, now MarineLorD with a massive army, massive enough that he feels confident taking his own rocks at this point. So he is saying, I am maxed, I am looking to trade, I have a timing here. And I mean, he has kind of withheld, the Zealots have not gained any value here for ShoWTimE. So this is an extremely scary attack for MarineLorD. ShoWTimE kind of, I don't want to say missed his timing, but I mean, this fight is potentially gonna go well for the French here. The Archons have not been EMP'd. However, in spite of the Ghosts being present on the battlefield, no longer are they present. However, the two Colossus continue to push the army back. And with this, I mean, ShoWTimE's gonna get a comfortable cleanup. The EMPs nowhere to be found.
Yeah, that's a really big pickup, like you said. No EMPs, but perhaps the most interesting thing about that is he's like, you killed most of the zealots. He bled through most of them, but that's why you have 25 charge loss with an army. It just, even with the kiting, with the stutter stepping, without having Vikings there that are killing the Colossi during the fight, without having Liberators there that are like killing, you know, other stuff. It's just, you're just kiting against zealots the whole time. You have to target fire to get anything else. But when there's 25 of them, well, that opportunity, not quite the same. So now ShoWTimE still has his power units, and he's pushing towards that third base of MarineLorD, and he's going to have to push into the Colossi in order to take this fight, and that's what he does. But SCVs are going to be melted in the process.
Wow, yeah, massive EMPs. And this time around, ShoWTimE not intending to ever run away from this army, so he holds the high ground and the ramp instead of, say, going past the corner. MarineLorD notes that this is GG after losing so much, so he will tap out. And a wonderful display from ShoWTimE. A ShoWTimE that I thought would be up against the wall against that push from MarineLorD. Nate, he was maxed out, MarineLorD, and ShoWTimE had so very many zealots that I thought that was gonna favor the French. But the EMPs, I don't know what happened. Was that just Phoenix lifts?
It was a little bit of it. I really think it was a good army composition that he set himself up with, where he was like, okay, the tank stuff in the early game is always going to be something that you have to worry about. He had a kind of more stalkery, disruptor type of army in the last map, and on Blackburn rather, and just the way that he was able to dive on top of everything. Like there were no Vikings. MarineLorD's been playing very brawler style, a lot of Marauders, a lot of Marines, just not really setting himself up to have that more rounded out composition. And I think he was just caught off guard by the number of zealots, wasn't able to burst through that army. It was quite tanky. And maybe we'll get another adjustment from him as he tries to claw things back from ShoWTimE. We'll get into game number 4 after a short break. You're watching DreamHack Masters Europe. We'll be right back. Well, it's been a crazy day of games over here at the DreamHack Masters for Europe, but we find ourselves with a 2-1 lead in favor of ShoWTimE against MarineLorD as we get ready to jump into game 4. Cats, this one's going to be on Romanticide, which is a map pretty much known for opening up the playbook as far as defensive or greedy or tech type styles go. Very good map for holding attacks. So maybe we get something pretty weird here, huh?
Maybe we get something different than that. I would love to see it. I mean, we'll have to wait and see. We are now loaded in, and in the top left-hand side, the man more likely to make weird things in this series, it is MarineLorD.
And his opponent in the southeast, dealing with the chaos, holding off the crazy, he is ShoWTimE.
Nate, I love your analysis of the last moments of the game, because I did feel like, in retrospect at least, that MarineLorD did lack those Vikings, right, to answer the Colossus. So I wonder if that was an oversight. Do you just think he didn't expect that many Colossus at that point, or didn't see the Colossus transition? Or is that a move that you think maybe he feels like he actually has enough Marauders to overwhelm? And yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it boils down to the economy situation. MarineLorD's macro has been very strong, but unlike Blackburn, on Oxide, he was never able to establish the kind of economy that would let him put out Ghosts, Liberators, Vikings, and have the medevac count high. When we talk about that Blackburn game, one of the biggest things was every time there was a fight, all the tech units got away, the medevacs escaped, etc. The first time MarineLorD took that big fight outside of the 4th, even though he canceled it, when that fight ends up happening anyway, I mean, he really needed to disengage immediately, and that it could have been a big dub for him. But he ends up getting into the fight anyway, and he doesn't have that wealth of tech units to protect him. But more importantly, even as that army gets cleaned up, he couldn't even save the medevacs because ShoWTimE opened up with those 4 or 5 Phoenix. So
he did,
it's like a couple little things here and there. Yeah,
and difficult. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I understand everything that you're saying. So like, he couldn't maybe diversify as much as he would have liked. He couldn't have the complexity that he could have liked, and difficult to blame him for going for the Ghost when he did, right? Because he was seemingly facing Archon Celot.
Yeah, and you're what you asked originally, by the way, is also correct. You don't necessarily expect the Protoss to have 25 Zealots and 2 or 3 Colossi with Phoenix and still Stalkers and Sentries, because they were Force Fields, they were Guardian Shields. It made it really hard for him to kill those units. And again, it's like, hey, don't overextend. What does overextending really mean? It's, did you come and do your job? If yes, did you leave? If not, then you're kind of asking for it, right? It's like, I came here to cancel the 4th. The 4th base was canceled. But I got a little greedy, stayed around, took another fight, didn't try to disengage, and lost everything. And that's the kind of mistake that happens when you overestimate your position in a game. He obviously must have felt good canceling that base, but MarineLorD maybe getting a little bit cocky on the tail end of that one, especially since he did play such a good game too on Blackburn.
Yes, indeed. Credit to ShoWTimE as well for his positional game has been completely on point. Like, wherever he chooses to take those fights, it's always considerate of his own army composition, right? So like that time around, he waited until he was kind of in a choke, and that's where the Colossus are going to thrive. Obviously, it's not the biggest choke in the world, but it is certainly not completely open space either. And he does very well to take 2 engagements, even the one that ended the game up that ramp, just identifying the strengths of those Colossus. And oftentimes, I mean, it's for Protoss and Zerg to decide where the engagement happened, oftentimes, especially in that early game, because Protoss tends to be a little bit more of a, like, once you engage with the charge lots, it's not like you can activate charge to run away, right? So Terran is the quicker army by default, but once the engagement starts, it kind of just has to keep going for the Protoss players, or if they're disengaging, they're working at a loss. So great job from ShoWTimE deciding where and when to take those engagements really throughout the series.
Yeah, it's I think ShoWTimE has played this whole series pretty phenomenally. Like, the one map that he lost, it's kind of like one of those things where it just didn't, there weren't really a whole lot of things that he could do. MarineLorD just kind of used everything like way beyond the expectation of what we would typically see, and you can't anticipate that your opponent's again, you can't predict someone's gonna YOLO into all 4 of your disruptors and not lose their army, right?
Wow,
you can't count on that. But fancy Widow Mine Micro is gonna net him 3 probes. Not a bad pickup for just 1 mine.
Not too bad. Also denying the mining there for a little while as well. So if we look at the income graph, that should be reflected there for at least some moments. Not irrelevant given the duration of this game so far.
Yeah, man, this series has really given us a lot to think about, though, because it's clear that in a late game situation in TvP, MarineLorD's pretty comfortable, which is a strange thing to think about, because you always look at ShoWTimE as he's not the cheesy player, he's not the crazy YOLO all-in guy. He's the wall. He macros up, he powers up. If you don't do anything to him, he just eventually builds a big army, and eventually will come and kill you if he feels like it, but not until he has everything in place. He's a very methodical player, and MarineLorD kind of feels similar in that way, but it's been a long time since I've thought about a TvP in this way, where it's like the Terran wants the game to go long so they can have their full complete army, because the way MarineLorD controlled, just I mean, he made it look busted. Honestly, on Blackburn, it was a really, really brutal game. He played it pretty much perfectly. So he's got a couple tanks out now. It's a very fast storm and charge for ShoWTimE once more. And we did see it got a little bit awkward. That was the build that he went for in the first map. But he's going to try to force out those ghosts early on and then probably go into the Colossi so he can't use the Vikings. These stalkers get into the main base, though. Auto turret for the Observer. Does get the Observer. But wow, kills the Raven. That's a huge win.
That is a huge win, but the Raven, I mean, does what it can as it deflects the Stalkers. They don't get any additional SCVs, and it kills the Observer as well. So good job by MarineLorD knowing to prioritize the auto turret focus firing first before dropping a second auto turret and letting his Raven go down. So cute moves in chaos. Of course, the trade is still favorable for ShoWTimE.
Now, we've got an interesting situation again, because we had that push, as we recall in the first game. What made it interesting was the Raven. But since that's off the table, Cats, there is no possibility to interference matrix a prism that has the Templar in it. And for that reason, I don't think MarineLorD can effectively attack ShoWTimE. Look at where the observers are. He's got good vision. Pylon in the northeast, Pylon in south central. He's going to have a good heads up on anything coming his way. This one Widow Mine in the medevac. ShoWTimE, he's more than on top of it, and he's ready to shut it down. Feedback, boom, boom, goodbye, sayonara. And this is the ShoWTimE kind of play that we expect. So what are you going to do against this type of army? I think it's just going to kick us a little bit faster into that later stage of the game, because again, if you don't go for the Ghost Academy, how are you supposed to deal with Templar and Storm and Archons? You're just going to get roasted.
Absolutely and completely agreed, Nate. And I mean, I think that MarineLorD, like you were saying, he is confident in that later game. I earlier was saying that he is the type of player that likes to min-max a lot. He will do the earlier cheesy strategies. He will do the macro cheese in a certain way. And on this particular map, and having not found any success in the early game, but also not having made any great commitments in the early game, right? Like he got his third situated at a good time, etc. I think we're just going to see both players kind of going later into the game, which to most players, most Terran players in this day and age, is not a comfort zone or something that they wish to go up against Protoss. But MarineLorD is a very well-learned and rehearsed player when it comes to what is my ideal army compositions, what are some of the good matchups for different units in this matchup, and he has always had excellent control come the late game. However, before that, he is going to be doing a mid-game push, and this is where I tend to favor ShoWTimE, just generally speaking stylistically. So we'll see if he can land these storms. That's going to be crucial.
It's very, very, very important. The tanks can still try to zone away the Templar, but the problem, of course, is that the Zealots are a really great answer to those, and these Widow Mines may end up causing more harm to MarineLorD if he's not careful. So he's going to get the cancel on the fourth, but how greedy is he going to be, Cats? Is he going to force it here?
I don't think he should. He already, you talked about overextending before, and that's something that we've seen MarineLorD do. I think you just pack up and leave. Now, there is a little bit of counter aggression from the Warp Prism on the other side of the map, but MarineLorD already has a fourth on the way, Nate. He's going to be good to head further into the late game, but again, he's looking for a little bit more damage, and this is a very confident move, but I'm not sure that it's the right one. He will hide back and try to have the tanks and the mines punish the Zealots on the chase, but the Zealots will not overextend in turn, and please pack up and move.
And that Colossus transition comes in hot with it too. So we're talking about how you need to get the ghosts out, how you need to ramp up that economy. But that Prism is still up there to actually mess with him in the main base too. So we finally get to see ShoWTimE doing a little bit more of, I think this is exactly what we were discussing on as far as ways he could have gotten that edge back on Blackburn. His defense has been good, but make good use of the Prism. Bring those attacks in when possible. Somehow MarineLorD hasn't really taken much damage from it, and he is maxed out. However, that army composition still needs to be rounded out. He's maxed, but it's because he's got 74 SCVs. He doesn't have more. He has 2 Vikings and 2 Ghosts. So I don't know how aggressive you want to be.
Well, I mean, he is maxed, so he has to find some sort of trades. The position for MarineLorD is very, very good here. I'm surprised that the rest of his army isn't making moves elsewhere, though, because this is going to force ShoWTimE to answer this and to reposition. ShoWTimE has had very good vision of this area, and now he's actually looking to collapse onto the army of MarineLorD. So this opens up for MarineLorD to kind of make something happen positionally here, but he has been spotted by 2 different observers on the pathway, so it's not going to be easy, and a beautiful storm from the high ground from ShoWTimE to start things off here.
Little grubby High Templar right there, just chilling in a random place, waiting for opportunity. And that observer on the left side, by the way, is MVP, as he's had tabs on this force for a hot minute. Brings the observer back over to deal with these mines, and the defense is done for ShoWTimE. And as you were talking about, yes, he definitely wanted to trade some of his supply out. It's still going to take some time for that transition. He builds 5 ghosts. Yeah. There are 3 Colossi, so you have to decide. It's like, well, I've only got 2 Vikings. They're actually chasing down the Prism. Yep. So if you're ShoWTimE and you know that your opponent doesn't have any Vikings at all you need are the Zealots to just block Marauders from jumping onto the Colossus themselves, and you can take a really good fight.
All right, we'll see if he's able to do that. At the same time, he has been adding Disruptors, and Disruptors obviously not the greatest synergy with Zealots. Well, beautiful Disruptor ball there, however, to take down some of these mines. And small armies here clashing from both players. Neither player really looking to bring their entire army to dislodge each other, and so neither player will also have an opportunity to be careful. MarineLorD, I mean, this is most of the army of ShoWTimE. You know that because there was so little of it at the north. But MarineLorD has done a really good job of just keeping this area annoying. Earlier, I was saying maybe just pounce, maybe just back away, but now he's just continued to be annoying. I don't mind him trading these units anymore. ShoWTimE, however, has decided that he does want this forward base, and he finally looks to punch MarineLorD out of that place.
Yeah. And while all of this has been happening on the right side, and there is going to be more action in a moment, the way that his army's been placed back home, he's been constantly kind of spreading it around. He's waiting for like a big counterattack that assumes his whole army is out on the map, which is a very standard way to try and take down a Terran when they're being really, really aggressive like this. But he's kept it split. He's taking these light pokes, jumps back. Just don't want to lose those valuable tech units because he's pulling them all the way east, and the rest of the army is getting ready to hit that south base.
MarineLorD checking for that High Templar. He's not going to fall for that twice, and does get decent position here. Now there is a choke that ShoWTimE is going to have to go through, so a lot of these units are getting taxed as they kind of come to defend this base. Also worth noting is that MarineLorD got rid of all the observers on the pathway to ShoWTimE this time around, so ShoWTimE didn't see this attack coming, and that is why MarineLorD finds that position this time. So MarineLorD, scarier and scarier. He has done a great job on the information game, right? We see the scans constantly, just making sure that his army is not being watched.
That's right, and he's been keeping good tabs like we were talking about. And this is getting back towards that place from the Blackburn as far as the situation goes. He's got a good setup. His army is starting to get really diversified. EMP lands on the Disruptors. He's going to click on him, pushing through with the rest of this. Now, the overcharged shield battery is at this Nexus, so it'll make it a little bit tougher for him to crack that. He kites back, picks off the Zealots once more. But 4 Colossus, as well as 2 Disruptors, make it very risky to move in there. This time, ShoWTimE's able to actually get that planetary picked off too. And this is a huge amount of the economy that gets obliterated. Disruptor shot is going to be able to land. Every unit that dies here is so big because ShoWTimE still has 4 Colossus. 1 more does get picked. The 3rd is saved by the Prism.
DTs with Blink, the bane of MarineLorD's existence. Lucky for him, he has extra command centers. He has a lot of real estate to work with on the north side of the map, but he would have loved to win the tug of war on this side because that's just pretty much lights out for ShoWTimE, right? If he continues to establish that base that just got taken down. If he continues to be able to just park his entire army here, the slightest victory tilted in his favor would net him the most forward, most recent base from ShoWTimE, and that could just very well be game. So nice job from ShoWTimE. That was a very well needed positional victory, and now looking to make something happen on the rest of the map.
Yes, and it's a critical moment because the way that like TVP kind of flows, it used to be that you would get these ranged liberators a lot earlier, and then everybody adjusted to them very nicely. But back in the day, they had a little bit more range with the upgrade, and you needed tempests and whatnot to break them. But at some point, if he gets enough liberators, then engaging the army will become very tough. That +2 is finishing, like we were discussing earlier. That's going to enable 2 taps on the stalkers. As of right now, they still take those 3 hits, so they're a bit more durable. Oh, eats onto the planetary fourth, and that is gone. GG.
Wow.
ShoWTimE is going to do it. MarineLorD